Okay, so just a quick review from last class. We were looking at the structures and the components of the excretory system. So the two kidneys, coming off of the two kidneys were these two tubes. They're called the ureters. The ureters lead to the bladder, and then the urethra leads to the outside of the body. All right, so those are the structures of the urinary or excretory system. And then we had looked at the kidney. We had looked at the cross section of a kidney, and the outer part here is called the renal cortex. Anytime you see that word renal, it's pertaining to kidney. This middle section here is called the renal medulla, and then here in this section here, that's called the renal pelvis, which we can see here once the blood vessels were removed. Now the functional unit, the unit inside the kidney that is performing the function, that was called the nephron. And it's the nephrons that we are going to look at in a little bit more detail today. So nephrons, there are millions of those. They are embedded within the renal cortex, and they extend into the renal medulla. There's over 1 million of them. And these are responsible for filtering the substances from the blood and transforming it into urine. And there's three main regions of a nephron. There's a filter, a tube, and a duct. All right, so again here, we're looking at a nephron much closer up. And so this is a single nephron within the kidney. And again, you can see the renal cortex from here to here, and then the renal medulla. So we can see that this nephron is embedded within the cortex and the renal medulla. So main functions of kidneys are to filter waste, reabsorb nutrients and water, and secrete hormones. Filtration and reabsorption take place in the nephron, while kidney secretions are a function of the hormone system. The three functional regions, there's the filter, the tubule, and the duct. And we will take a look at that now. All right, so let's take a look at the filter part of the nephron. So this structure, the filtration structure at the top of each nephron, it's a cap-like formation. It's called the Bowman's capsule. It's right here. This capsule-like structure kind of makes a C shape. That's the Bowman's capsule. And within each capsule, we can see there's a renal artery that enters, and it splits into a fine network of capillaries here. And that's called the glomerulus. So inside this cap-like structure, there's all these capillaries. That's called the glomerulus. And this structure outside, that's the Bowman's capsule. So the walls of the glomerulus act as a filtration device. They are impermeable to proteins, meaning proteins cannot get through. So they're impermeable to proteins, other large molecules, and red blood cells. All right, those cannot get through. So they will remain within the blood. The water, small molecules, ions, and urea, recall that urea was the main waste product of metabolism, those can pass through the walls and proceed further into the nephron. Once that has filtered through the glomerulus, that filtered fluid is now called filtrate. All right, so the filtered fluid that proceeds from the glomerulus into this Bowman's capsule of the nephron is now called filtrate. Okay, now we are looking at the tubule part. All right, so we've got the proximal tubule here. It extends down. It's called the loop of Henle. It has the descending loop, and then upward is called the ascending loop. and keep following that, and then we get to the distal tubule. All right, so the Bowman's capsule is connected to a small, long, narrow tubule that is twisted back on itself to form a loop. The long hairpin loop is a reabsorption device. The tubule has 3 sections: the proximal tubule, the loop of Henle, and the distal tubule. This tubule absorbs substances that are useful to the body, such as glucose and a variety of ions, from the filtrate passing through it. This tubule also secretes substances into the tissues surrounding it. And lastly is this duct. So after the distal tubule, we get to this duct here. It's called a collecting duct. So the tubule empties into this larger pipe-like channel. It's called a collecting duct. And this collecting duct, it functions as a water conservation device, reclaiming water from the filtrate passing through it so that very little precious water is lost from the body. The filtrate that remains in the collecting duct is a suspension of water and various solutes and particles, and it is now called urine. So in the collecting duct, it will now be called urine. Its composition is distinctly different from the fluid that entered here in the Bowman's capsule. So from the Bowman's capsule to the collecting duct, that fluid is very different. The solutes and water that's reclaimed during reabsorption are returned to the body by the renal veins. So here is the renal veins. All right, we're going to stop here. We're going to watch a couple videos